Yeah, good morning, everybody, or everyone. I had an English teacher used to say, "Body that book," so it should be everyone. So, good morning, everyone. Um, just another insert, as you will become accustomed to my commentary on what's going on, especially as it relates to the current topic that's in the news cycle. The um, corruption and fraud that has undertaken one of our top um, Jamaican citizens and athletes, Mr. Usain Bolt, accompanied by about 40 other persons in one quote unquote failed SSL investment company or corporation, is insignificant as to its designation right now. What's significant though is that the fraud has been committed, and apparently has been an ongoing conspiracy between several individuals. That's what it looks like. Investigations will prove or disprove those assertions or allegations. So, as it stands, everything now is alleged. But of course, there are obvious actions on the part of some of these individuals that spell trouble for not only them but for the business itself that was intact and operating up until last week, when the FSC supposedly went in and took control and then subsequently filed to get an injunction to take a hold of the corporate assets itself, which is pretty tardy, because as I had said in previous pronouncements on video, is that I was shocked that the FSC or the government didn't go in and seize their assets or lock them down the very moment this became a newsworthy item, or when I discovered it. So they're slow in acting. We won't speculate as to why, but it does give rise to further speculation that the authorities were giving these people time, or buy themselves, or buy time to do what they needed to do to protect themselves and their assets, which is what I'm going to comment on. Because the Prime Minister, I heard him in a statement saying, well, the government can't be responsible for compensating persons who go into an investment scheme or company and pretty much lose their money, which is correct. If a person voluntarily went and became an investment partner, and I use that term loosely, with any corporate entity or individual, and that investment goes awry and there's loss, then by right the loss should be absorbed by that person, and government has no place in compensating people for losing their investments. That's why you have the whole securities industry being set up along that path, that when you invest with the knowledge that you risk everything you're putting in, and there are no guarantees. And if anyone should use a guarantee to you in terms of your investment, then you should seek to get them locked up under the Law Reform Fraudulent Transaction Act, which was passed in 2013, because no verbal, written, or other promises that spell one thing and can't deliver guaranteed on the other, then that amounts to fraud. And that's exactly what we're facing with. And so I was taken aback when the Prime Minister made that loose statement, and which is correct in one instance, but in this particular instance, he's talking about corruption and fraud ongoing, and has been ongoing in the SSL Corporation, or Limited Liability Company, from newscasts from 2010, 2011, 2012. Really doesn't matter. The fact is, it was ongoing from then, and the FSC was well aware of their non-compliance in certain areas, and therefore should have taken action to protect the persons who the government were investing on the faith of the government, because the government licensed these persons and gave people the okay. These guys are okay, go put your money there and invest. And I'm pretty sure the government is always out there telling people not to invest with this particular individual or that particular group, because So in terms of assuring people that these persons were kosher and good to do business with, on one hand is something that the government should take into consideration when people are defrauded, because ultimately they are liable in the first place for giving people licenses to operate in an arena, and when the government agency, the regulator that's operating or guiding these individuals to protect the investors, when that agency fails miserably, then obviously if it's a government agency and they're negligent in their behavior and complicit, which is all the above that the FSC engaged in, that there should be some consideration from the government to compensate persons, either directly from central government, who gets revenue, I suppose, from the FSC, or vice versa. They provide the FSC with funding. Whichever it is, though, they remain liable. That's like saying a doctor certifies another doctor in his operation, and that doctor turned out to be fraudulent and hurt people in the process of conducting his examinations, and then the primary doctor is saying, oh, we don't have any involvement with that. You took your chances when you went with this guy because supposedly he's operating on a license he got from somewhere. But the point is that the chief medical officer who owns that facility hired this guy and gave people the impression or confidence that trust him because you put him in place for me to come in there and put my health and wellness in that person's hand. And when they turn around to be fraudulent and it turns out to be malpractice, then certainly it's not only the practitioner but the doctor who owns the firm that employed this individual and then recommended him to all the other parties. So again, government can't just wash their hands of this particular case, and therefore I would suggest to Mr. Bolt and the other 40-odd persons, I had suggested it before, that on the criminal side the government is investigating, but on the civil side, which is what you want to be, you want to go get your money and your assets, and so that you could have some semblance of satisfaction, or that you'll get back some of your money, if not all. So I recommended before that get together, do a class action suit, meet with your attorneys. If your attorneys are smart, they'll stop delaying, because as I had said before as well, that 10-day letter thing was just an annoyance. In any legal circle, when things like this happen, you need to act ASAP. Send letters after you file a suit, because again, everybody knew that these people weren't going to comply to any kind of request for a number of reasons. Legally, if they complied, it would imply that they do have the money stashed someplace, and then they could just go and pull it up. They couldn't use the basis of, oh, we have the money invested in XYZ in entity or corporation, local or international, and then somebody calling for the money and we go pick it up. That's not how it works. If money is invested, it's invested over a period of time, for a period of time, and if there's a maturity date, then that's when the person can go pick up their money. So if they had complied and gone ahead and just supplied money, which they supposedly didn't have because they lost it, then they would embrace the fact that they're in fact committing fraud or committed fraud, and to cover themselves they went and got some money. And where did they get this money from if they didn't have it stashed? So A, they couldn't come out and say we're going to give you back your money. Two, they have to protect everybody else if they're a legitimate business. In protecting everybody else, it means if there was a loss in investments, then everybody deserves to be protected, and therefore if they singled out and just rallied money and gave Mr. Bolt and left everybody else hanging, then there's something wrong with that as well. So we have to be very careful how we keep suggesting that these people must give back Mr. Bolt his money. What about the other people? And I keep saying that yes, it hurts. Mr. Bolt is hurting, and so he deserves to be compensated. But again, there are a number of factors you have to consider. Was the fraud really fraud? If it was, yeah, the money is gone. If it wasn't fraud, then it means, yeah, well, he's going to suffer a loss legitimately. But in order for us to justify any kind of refunding of funds when it comes to an investment, it means that company would have to protect everybody in the company and prevent a run on the business. So when they made the move the other day to liquidate or shut down their business, there was nothing illicit or illegal in that. That's just normal business practice. If your business is bound to fail, which it was or is failing, and you don't see any hope for the future, then you have the fiduciary, the responsibility of a fiduciary to go and shut it down and then inform persons that we had to take these moves, and therefore when we liquidate or we call in a receiver and an audit is done, whatever is left, we will get it to you, if that's what's supposed to happen. Because in truth and in fact, they would have liabilities, or they should have liabilities, which they have to take care of first and foremost. So if they had creditors or lenders, those people would have to be compensated first. And that goes right back to where we are again in terms of a refund on those investors that lost money, whether it's through fraud or legitimate causes. Then the fact is, we have creditors who take a priority position in those corporate dealings are winding up. So in the first persons, the persons that are creditors to the agency or the limited liability company will have to be compensated first, especially if they have what they call priority positions, or if they have persons with what you call priority shares. I don't think that's not the right terminology right now, but they have, and if they have secured loans, guaranteed loans, those persons would have to be covered first. So it's not as simple as just them going in and shutting down, and that would have been them skipping town. You know, the government is doing the very same thing by taking over and bringing in an injunction. That's exactly what they have to do now. And they have a responsibility of protecting the creditors or persons that money is owed to on a credit basis or a loan basis, and other obligations that are contracted. So again, the moves that we probably should be seeing being made by Mr. Bolt's attorneys, and I direct Mr. Bolt to sit with them again and discuss all the options, is not to wait on the criminal investigation, because the criminal investigation is government directed. They'll fix that. File your civil action against not only the business, but that's how you're going to establish yourself as a primary creditor, or as a creditor to the corporation. If indeed you lent money to the corporation to be invested, I don't know the terms of your investment agreement, but if you're a lender, then you file to protect yourself as a creditor. If you're an investor, again, that's a different story, but you still file a complaint against not only the business but the directors. Every director in that company had a responsibility, a fiduciary, to protect everybody that invested in the company. You know, directors aren't just there to sit down and go to big dinners and annual meetings and drink up liquor and eat food and then, you know, leave happy because they say we're paying out dividends. Every director has a responsibility to ensure that the business is being run in the manner in which it was, chartered to operate. And if they don't, they're liable. And again, it's not just the director. The CEO has a responsibility there as well. So the CEO, the directors, the workers in the company, the people who handle portfolios for individuals, they are liable as well. So I just do a blanket lawsuit against everybody, all the employees that operate there, because it does a number of things. One, it gives you the ability to now have each of these individuals or group of individuals sit and negotiate with you to settle that debt. And it will be easier on them when it goes to the criminal side as well, because if they settle to you previous to them going to criminal trial, the courts will consider that as a way to lessen the time they do for the crime, if they did commit a crime. But again, whether they committed a crime or it was just negligence on their part are simply complacency, then what should happen? You sue them as well because they're complicit, and therefore it allows you to negotiate with each of those individuals to compensate you for the total loss. And so you might be able to see some recouping of your funds via that angle, because if you don't, what's going to happen is at the end of the day, when the government conducts its business, the money that's left will be liquidated and cover creditors, and the government is not going to look out for you first and foremost. They're going to look out for the creditors, tax liabilities, all of those things are priority, and the government will take care of it. And so before a trial, which will probably 2, 3, 4 years down the road, then it means you'll be able to negotiate with these individuals and get a level of compensation that you probably wouldn't get through other methods. It's like a wrongful death suit. A person might be guilty of the death, the murder or killing of a person, but their actions contributed to the death somehow, and therefore you have a wrongful death suit. It's the same thing here. Call it what you will, wrongful creditor or investment house contributing to the demise of your portfolio and knowingly doing so, again, which is fraud. And you could file, I think, under the Fraudulent Transaction Act, the Law Reform Fraudulent Transaction Act, on the basis that these people have lied to you, and they've lied to you and the other persons that have been defrauded over an extended period, giving you misinformation, because if indeed they did supply you with a balance sheet that showed you had 12 million US in your account in 2022, and there was no such existing balance, then of course that's fraud, and it falls under the Law Reform Fraudulent Transaction Act. So apart from the fact that, again, the police, the fraud squad should act on that, you could also do the civil suit and on all of that and list every item, verbal, statement, written, anything that said or did that suggested that your investment was okay, but in truth and in fact it wasn't. And each of those persons who told you that are liable. So it's not just the young lady who admitted stealing the money, it's the person who worked with her, who knew what was happening or should have known what was happening, because it's not just one person that's managing an account, especially in an investment house. So again, liability stretches a far way. So I would take action against those persons and the entire firm and not wait, because your civil trial could probably end up going before the criminal trial, or you may be able to reach a settlement with these individuals privately without waiting on trial, the criminal trial, which again, you don't need to be spending any time and money there. Investigators will do their own thing. Now, I mentioned the Prime Minister before, and I mentioned him because when he made a statement like that, the Prime Minister is not just a CEO of a company. The Prime Minister is the #1 citizen of Jamaica. He has the responsibility of protecting every Jamaican citizen, every resident of the island, every visitor of the island. And regardless of whatever is happening, his priority is not to save himself, but to save everybody else. The captain goes down with his ship. He is the last person to leave the ship. And I remember a couple of years ago, there was a cruise liner, I think someplace in the Mediterranean or Europe, that ran aground. The captain was the first one who jumped ship, and he was tracked down until he was caught and tried, because that's a crime. If you have the responsibility for everybody and you make sure your butt is protected and leave everybody else hanging or drowning, then you are in fact in violation of your oath to the people of this country. and every person that's on the island or deals with the island. So it's not good enough to say the government isn't liable. Technically, yeah. But you as the Prime Minister are in fact liable for everything that happened for a number of reasons. One, you are the person that's responsible for every government agency that operates in this country. The buck stops with you. You are responsible for every financial institution that robs everybody in this country or have people's money deposited there. It is not good enough to say, oh, these people are licensed. No, they're operating in your country, the one that you run. And as the leader of the country, you are responsible for everything. So where a large circumstantial situation arises for the Prime Minister is that suspiciously the Prime Minister was able to take his money out of SSL and run suspiciously before or during all of this fraud and corruption that's been going on since 2010. Did the Prime Minister get warning? Did the Prime Minister know that these things are happening? Because as far as the news media is concerned, his friendship is beyond question. He's friendly with these people. So did they pick up the phone and call him and say, you know what, go secure your money, things not looking good? Because if he did that and left everybody else hanging, including the Jamaican people with investments from various government agencies, then the Prime Minister is also liable in that he knew and he did nothing to protect the country and people, and therefore he becomes extremely exposed to a lawsuit himself for being complicit. It's not good enough to take your money and run Mr. Captain of the ship and jump and leave everybody else to go drown, and then you're going to say, oh well, I just took my money out, I got off the ship because I see what's going down. No, you have a responsibility to the first thing that you should have done was bring in the appropriate regulatory agency authorities and bring legislation if necessary to stop this from happening, and you didn't. So the fact is, it's not easy to just say, oh well, I saved my butt and therefore it's everybody else for themselves. You're not running your own party shop, you're running a country. And that's what differentiates us from quote-unquote banana republics, where government typically don't care about anybody else but their own fattening of their own pockets. And therefore you have a responsibility to now answer questions to the investigators as to why did you run, why did you pull investments, why did you not inform people that you were involved in SSL during a period when you know and it was reported that these guys were conducting business unscrupulously. You have to explain your investment decision. Did you pull that money and put it elsewhere? And when you put it elsewhere, what were the factors over there that encouraged you to move all your assets from SSL, that was quote unquote supposedly one of the premier investment houses, and you pull your money out and put it someplace else or put it on your mattress? I don't care, I don't know. But you need to tell investigators, and investigators need to question you on those issues. Nobody is above the law, and neither is the Prime Minister of this country. And it's not just the Prime Minister. Who else in his administration had money over SSL and pulled it during this troublesome period? We have to know. And therefore the investigation has to be thorough. And again, these are questions our local cops can go find out for themselves. They don't need the FBI to come in and do that. But if they're here, I'm encouraging the FBI not to leave any stones unturned. Because again, the reality is that this one situation is not a one situation. It's not a one-off. That's what's been happening to Jamaica and the Jamaican people and the economy for decades. Subsequent governments coming in and putting a blind eye to the crime of corruption and fraud and leaving the Jamaican people hanging. And I'll point again that this is across the board. This isn't just about this one-off incident, and it's not just about Mr. Bolt. It's about the Jamaican economy and the Jamaican people. because everybody is hurting from this, and it's going to be hurting because people are discouraged from putting their money here. They can't trust us. And again, as I said in previous videos, that nobody can afford to put money in a country that they know they won't get a return or it's not safe, and therefore people will stop even buying homes here and investing. Tourists will stop coming because the same kind of corruption exists, because they know when they get here and they get hurt or they're not safe, because corruption exists, and people are allowed to do whatever they want to do and then get away with it. So again, it can't be just about what happened to Mr. Bolt. It's about what's happening to all of us. And if you still can't get the message I'm sending, is that one of our primary institutions, the third branch of government, the judiciary, is one of our most corrupt organizations in existence. And the reason for that is because they have never been audited. There is no oversight. Nobody bothers to check these people when they are caught red-handing involved in crimes of corruption and fraud. And I've documented time and time again, and I've pointed to you as a Jamaican citizen, as a concerned person, that you need to go gather the facts for yourself. Don't take it from me or anybody else. Gather the facts for yourself and then make the right calls and pressure government as to why they're not taking action to go investigate the fraud in the Supreme Court, which is documented, and the Prime Minister knows about it. So here again is a Prime Minister who knows about fraud because it's been reported to him, it's been reported to his office, his agencies, the fraud squad, the police, who is in charge of, he's over them. And it's been reported there. He can't pick up the phone and call NIA or the Integrity Commission, because we filed up to recently with NIA based on international organizations' recommendations. And we haven't heard anything from Mr. Trevor Monroe. So Mr. Monroe, if you're not going to do your job, then resign as well, because then you're just as complicit and all this glad talking when you come out as if, well, oh, you're so interested in corruption, but you're not taking action to stop it. We reported the crime to you. We reported the crime to the fraud squad, to the Commissioner of Police, to the Prime Minister, the Governor General. We reported to the Chief Justice. We reported to justices in the Supreme Court. And we filed documents even in the appeals court showing the fraud. And yet, I'm still here trying to figure out what the hell is going on in this country. Is it so blatant and apt that nobody really cares again? And they fail to understand that this is not just affecting a few people, it affects the entire country. Again, we had approved developments to be built with approved funding when all of this fraud started. And we're not talking about fraud of 11, 12, 13, 20, 40 million dollars. We're talking about billions of dollars. And in the court's records, we had expert witnesses who the court appointed, who did preliminary calculations and showed that at the preliminary, I say preliminary because they didn't know every calculation, because this was just to prove whether damage was done or not. They proved approximately $20 billion in US damages, and that doesn't include interest. And that's between, the damages they calculate was between 2012 and 2016. So now it's 2023. So you figure the level of damages that's been done. And in order to get these people who created the problem in the first place to get out, we have judges there who are appointing people as administrators and trustees for an estate that was fully probated and settled. And I repeat and remind you that when an estate is settled in probate, there is nothing else out there. Remember now, an estate is not a legal entity capable of doing anything. That's why you have an executor. So no estate existed when Justice B. Morrison knowingly appointed persons, Capital One, to be an administrator for an estate that doesn't exist. If that's not fraud, then what else is? The Law Reform Fraudulent Transaction Act of 2013, the very year Justice B. Morrison appointed Capital One administrator / trustee for a trust and an estate that was fully settled in probate. And the kicker again is that this estate had no connection or assets in Jamaica after it was settled. And in terms of a trust, the trust had no connection whatsoever to us or the Jamaican economy or any property here. And the appeals court, Jamaica's highest court, ruled on that matter and threw out their matter and said the only reason they weren't throwing it out and remanded it to the Supreme Court was because our attorneys, and the court didn't know this, but we had sent 3 separate emails to the attorney to ask the court to dismiss it. And she didn't, because her plan was to go and suck money out of us, and that's just the truth. So here it is, because of her negligence, her malpractice, and didn't ask the appeals court to dismiss, we're still stuck because it went back to the law tribunal. And then what happened? It went to a series of judges who completely ignored the rules of the court, the law of the land, and caused this matter to be still here. And again, it was dismissed fully in 2015, 29th of May 2015, by Justice Beswick, Lawrence Beswick. John Graham, who's the attorney for Capital One, said he didn't know what was happening, even though in the big old document the judge wrote on the front page, claim dismissed. He said he didn't know what was happening. The judge was accommodating and said, all right, I'm going to clarify. So from then to December 23rd, the judge took the time to go over and come back with our ruling again. And again, she said, you have no standing, you have no claim, nobody owes you anything. You must stop bothering these people, in short, because you not only now have a claim that was dismissed by the appeals court, but you should have been cautioned by that. And the only action you could take after this was to file an appeal. In fact, she limited both parties. If any action is to be taken, you file an appeal. And you owe these people damages that they prove. We complied with everything. He didn't. He goes over and within a month or less, he filed another lawsuit dealing with the same issues. And instead of kicking it out, them judges down there with them low-life self allowed him to continue the mess, and every time we went in front of them, they come up with some other excuse and refused to dismiss the matter that the courts already ruled they must be dismissed. And they have people's lives screwed up and messed up and figure it's okay. And this is independence of the judge. There's no such independence. A judge isn't allowed to defraud people or participate in defrauding people and think that's independent decisions or ruling of a judge. That's a crime. And again, that falls under the Law Reform Fraudulent Transaction Act, because you knowing that the law is saying any kind of misdirection, any kind of deception, lie, written or verbal, that's empowered or used to empower somebody else to commit fraud against another person, then you've committed a crime. Yet we have these people in there every day ruling on people's business. It needs to stop. So again, the Prime Minister can't just wash his hands of this matter, because he's proven that he's been negligent and complicit in dealing with other matters of significance, including fraud. And I'm talking about our matters that this government, this Prime Minister, with all his agencies, has completely ignored. And it's a much bigger and more dangerous scam and fraud to the Jamaican people and the economy. And yet, the persons who are listening to this or watching this video, I hope you're not being complicit by just being quiet. We need you to participate, and we need you to play a role in saving your own country, and in so doing, you're saving yourself. And all it takes is some pressure on the government and expose what they're doing. We ask all those persons who are content makers on social media to not just belittle or belabor the point that Mr. Gould has been robbed and he should get back his money. We all know this and we all believe that, and most of us know the likelihood of that happening is not going to happen. So become a larger force against fraud and corruption. Attack it not only based on what happened to Mr. Bolt and the other 48 persons, but attack it on the basis that this is happening to Jamaicans across the board. And we need you to play a role. Do the investigation. Again, the FSC is liable on the surface, and when you investigate it, the FSC is liable to compensate Mr. Bolt and all the investors who lost money at SSL. They're liable. If a government comes in and destroys your portfolio and destroy your property, then they're liable. If a government comes in and cause bodily harm, mental or physical illness to befall you because of their action or lack of action, they're liable. In the Carl Gardens incident, when Rastas, I think in 30, 40 years ago, were savagely brutalized, murdered, and dispossessed, the government has acknowledged that they must be compensated, and they should be. As much as the people who have been incarcerated in this country because of oppressive policies that exist, government must find solutions, and I'll come up with flimsy excuses about, on the surface, yeah, you're right, your government can't be compensating investors for their losses. But this isn't an investor that lost, there's fraud involved, and therefore any kind of fiduciary that the government has for the people of this country was lost when they neglected what happened to the Bolts and the other persons. The government is also liable because the FSC, which is the premier organization to protect investors, failed its mission. It failed its mission and caused these people to lose, if not all, most of their money. It damaged their lack of action, damaged this economy, and damaged this country's reputation, which is going to affect, or is already affecting, the economy, because I'm pretty sure people are pulling their money out of institutions right now, and rightly so. Can't trust any of them. So we need action from the government and stop being negligent in your responsibilities. I'm not begging this country to do the right thing. I'm telling you need to do the right thing because it's affecting the entire nation. And the Prime Minister needs to step up. The leader of the opposition needs to play his role and get in there and start throwing punches in favor of the Jamaican people. The leader of the opposition is an attorney. He's familiar with the investment industry. He's there familiar with fraud and facts pertaining to corruption. He shouldn't be quiet here or just throw little blows. Throw the biggest punches you can. If these people need to get out of there, then they need to get out of there if they're not doing their jobs. But you must prove to us that you're capable of going in and doing the right thing. And somehow I think you are, but we need to hear from you. And I'm talking now directly about the fraud that's undertaking us in the Jamaica Supreme Court involving Capital One, John Graham, Alexis Robbins from Meyer, Fletcher and Gordon, where this country is losing trillions, not billions, not millions, trillions of US dollars in direct investment that's owned predominantly by Jamaicans, which means the bulk of the capital that is earned from that would circulate in this country, making this economy stronger. Now, we're waiting to see. I want to thank you again, all the persons who took the time to listen, to not just listen, participate. Hit that like button. And I say hit it because I want you to get this information to other persons and share. And the reason I'm doing this is to ensure that we don't stop this fight, this declaration of war on corruption by the citizens, as citizens of this country, that we don't stop this war on crimes like this blue-collar crime that so many people keep getting away with until we solve the problem. So I'm asking you to share. Reach out to your friends, your family, because it affects you. If you have contacts with politicians, with the police, we still have that reward standing. And again, right now, I really don't care if the police or the fraud squad act on it. If there are persons within the judiciary who have the information that can expose all this fraud and put it in front of the public, well, then you can collect that reward. Conditions apply, of course. But 150 odd million Jamaican dollars towards your retirement is not a bad idea. Plus, again, we're giving $5 million to fight the corruption in the courts. And I am shocked and surprised that most of our persons who have taken a look at this video and heard what I'm saying aren't stepping up to play a role in making us have these changes done. Thank you. It's a great day. It's bright, it's sunny, it's cool. Another beautiful day in Florida. And I'm hoping to see Jamaica one day having the quality of life that we enjoy in Florida. It's not too far-fetched. Not as long as we persist in fighting and getting rid of crimes like corruption. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.